Hello everybody and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And before we even get into this week's weekly recap, we have a little bit of an announcement to make, and by a little bit, we mean a marginally large size announcement. You know how for the past 2 months we've been saying if you wanted to support the show financially, just wait a little bit? You don't have to wait anymore. You can just go support us financially now, because we have moved our merch store as well as implemented I think it's either 4, 5, or 6 new designs, as well as one remastered design onto our brand new storefront at My Spread Shop. So if you want to support the show financially, just get it right out of the way. There's a 14-day special where if you order within the first 14 days of the shop being active, you get 15% off your entire order. No promo code required. Just go to AggieevilleAlleycats.myspreadshop.com. It's exactly how it spells. Or if you want to check out the description of this podcast, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever else you listen on, or our Twitter banner and link in there, go ahead, take a look at the new designs such as established alley cats, retro recording alley cats, and Connor and I's personal favorite, shame. Could have happened to anybody. But with that out of the way, we can now talk about the actual bits that people probably wanted to listen to. And that is the weekly recap. We're going to go over Catsketball recruiting, Catsketball in the Middle East, and then the Soccer Cats, and everyone's favorite, the wacky segment of the week. So let's just dive straight into Catsketball recruiting with a brand new transfer commit. And Connor can attest that before this commit, or even before this commit was even talked about, I was getting a little antsy.
Yeah, you were.
I was a little nervous.
No, you definitely were, and it's fair. I've kind of reached the point where I just trust that the staff is going to figure something out, even though it makes zero sense, logically. I sit there and I try to think about it reasonably, and I'm I should be, really worried about what's happening right now. But I just am no, it's okay. And I think Ace, you've reached that point as well. Because it's clear that they just kind of figure it out, and that's all right. And Keith Glover is a good get, especially for this late in the portal cycle.
Yeah.
He probably was the best possible player we could have gotten at this point in the portal.
Yeah. But that is the new commit. That is Keith Glover, the guard formerly of Samford as well as formerly of Florida. He was originally committed to BYU before he ended up backing out of that commitment, re-entering the transfer portal, and deciding to commit to your Kansas State Wildcats. He is a guard who has a pennant for scoring. Pennant for scoring. Yes. He has a penchant for scoring. And he averaged, I believe, 15 points at Samford last year, as well as shooting in the high 30s from the beyond the arch. And if there was one skill set that I really wanted this team to get, the other one was a true point, but I know that that's just not how Tang operates, so that one I just kind of gave up on. I wanted another outside scoring threat. And yet here we are, with Keith Glover joining the K-State Wildcats. Unfortunately, he didn't join them fast enough to join them in the Middle East, but he was, the brand new commit. I believe Tang actually tweeted out the Tang signal at 4 a.m. Israeli time.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, last year he averaged 14.7 points per game. Although that was in fewer minutes and fewer games than the prior year. He battled some injuries last year, so he didn't play 20 games. The year prior, he played in 29, started 28, and averaged 19 a game. And on top of that, he shot 46% from the field and about 31% from three. But most of his shots were not three-pointers, despite him being only 6 foot 180. So what that tells me is that he's doing a lot of driving to the bucket, which is something that we had Desi Sills do a lot last year. As kind of that sixth man off the bench. Keys is not as big as Desi Sills, which could be a potential concern, but I'm still looking forward to seeing what he can add. He's not a born three-point shooter, it seems like. That's just not his game, really. Although he did shoot pretty well last year from three. It's just that he was only making about one a game. It was about 38% on lower volume. So Keith Glover, really good add. I think someone that's going to be primarily a scorer. I don't know anything about his defense. I haven't watched much of his game. I haven't had the chance to watch film on Keith Glover yet. But it seems like everybody's pretty happy with the ad, and I'm just going to go and defer to others' judgment who have seen film on him. Again, you can't really be too picky at this point in the portal, as we've seen plenty of people say. So I think all in all, this is about as good an ad as you could ask for at this point.
Yeah, and it's scholarship number 12, so there's still one open scholarship. But I remember pretty much the day after I really started getting worried, because I was a little bit apprehensive for a lot of this last few months or so. Tang said, it's like, oh, there'll be someone else in the portal that we can pick up. And I really don't think there would. Lo and behold, here we are. So, once again, I must hold the L for my lack of faith in Jerome Tang. I have no reason for it, and it immediately stopped after I heard him talk again. I think he just has that effect on people. But, yeah, this is a really, really big pickup, because it's just another piece of the puzzle. Like, if his ceiling is Desi, like if he's going to be Desi again, okay, yeah, no, I'll take a 6-man of the year contender every day of the week. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd be totally happy with that. I hope that he can come in and really gel with the team quickly. He should be here quicker than Desi was here, so they should be able to start building chemistry a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy. I'm very happy with that Keith Glover ad, and we can thank BYU for it, because they their coach went out publicly and pretty much just said it was NIL was the reason. And if you put your ear to the ground, it was a BYU NIL issue. So
a skill issue, some might say.
Yeah, I would call it a skill issue. They've really failed their speech check with Keith Glover on NIL. So
coming in hot with a 30 speech. But yeah, I really do think that I know I said I should just stop doubting him. I'm not sure 13 gets filled, but if it does. I think the roster right now is complete enough to where it could make a tournament run. And that also was a little bit aided by what we saw in basketball in the Middle East. But before we talk about that, here is a quick word from today's sponsor. And welcome back to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats, where we're going to be discussing basketball in the Middle East, at least the first 2 games of it. The first game was against Israel Select, which K-State ended up winning, despite the fact that Israel absolutely refused to miss a 3, especially a deep 3.
Yeah. They had an unbelievable shooting night against K-State. K-State ended, I think it was 94-87 was the final score. I was able to watch most of the game. There were some guys that really stood out as well. Guys like Arthur Kaluma. He looked really, really good. He started out really hot as well. So there were some people who really come away from that game really thinking that they're going to have a huge impact this year. Who were some of the ones that you were thinking of, Ace?
I mean, you mentioned the obvious one in Arthur Kaluma, or as I will be calling him, King Arthur. He had an awesome game, especially against Israel, where I think he scored the first 8 points of the game against Israel Select. And overall, he just looked great, like the entire game. There was not a single possession that I can think of where he wasn't, one of the focal points of the offense. Of course, Naquan, he looked like beginning of the season last year, Naquan, where he would choose to be either the worst player on the court or the best player on the court, and it would alter from possession to possession, and there would be no in between.
Yeah, he was definitely pretty inconsistent in this first game. There were a few times where he badly missed 3-pointers. One an air ball and one barely hitting the front of the rim. There were a few times where defensively he looked a little lost, but then there would be times where he would throw down just ferocious dunks and would make people look silly with some great dribble moves and block shots and look really solid on defense. So I think some of that is just going to be locking back in for Naquan Tomlin over the course of time, because clearly the talent is there. He arguably looks a little faster compared to last year, which I don't know how he managed that. Yeah, he had some incredible dunks in that first game, including some poor guy who just posterized into oblivion. But it was a really entertaining showing from Naquan Tomlin, if not a little bit erratic.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention one of the passes and who one of the passes came from that led to one of those posterizations. That was a true freshman. I believe it was your favorite true freshman.
It was Day-Day Ames.
Indeed, it was.
And he didn't score on the day, but he looked like a pretty good distributor. He looked like he knew what he was doing in the game. I wasn't able to watch it super closely. I had to take a few breaks, but Day-Day did play a lot. All the freshmen played a pretty solid amount, more than I was expecting. And which I guess it does make sense given that David Gasson isn't there, and now we have Keith Glover, and he also isn't there.
Yeah.
So I was very happy that Day-Day Ames got some significant minutes. And even though he didn't have this prolific scoring night, he looked good as a point guard. He looked shifty and quick. He was a creative passer as well. There's a lot to like about his debut, although you can say that for all the freshmen.
True. I don't think there's anyone in the game, in that first game, that you could say holistically had a bad or a terrible game. Tyler Perry, I wasn't impressed with in the first 2 quarters. Then he really turned it on in the back 2. That was my knee. But I guess if I had to pick one that would be the worst, and it's not because he was bad, it'd probably be Taj. Taj just didn't, for all the hot hype that Taj Manning was getting, he didn't do as much as you would have thought. And again, that's not to say he was bad, because like I said, I don't think anyone had a truly bad performance. But I would describe myself as whelmed with Taj Manning's performance.
Yeah, he started, and then he only played about 6 minutes, and that was it, which I thought was a little strange. So he must have had a really good practice leading up to it, and then just kind of not translated to the court.
Either that, or he's the closest thing to DNG they had.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I mean, Colbert is probably your best translator, or best translation to center. But I imagine they went with Tomlin at the 5 instead, just to play some smaller ball. But I'm not 100% sure what their thought process was with Taj. Maybe they did have him in that David Gasson role. I'm honestly not really sure what they think of as Taj Manning playing. But I don't know. I was hoping for a little bit more from Taj, because I was excited when he was in the lineup, but he didn't really do a whole lot.
Yep. And the next game in Abu Dhabi was up against the Mexican national team, if I'm remembering correctly. Ended up falling short by 1 point despite a really clutch shot by Tyler Perry to push ahead. Ultimately ended up being fouls because both Tyler Perry and Naquan Tomlin fouled out. This game was weird because the refs were... You know how sometimes you have games where in the Big 12 where refs just swallow their whistles? In other games where they're calling everything? This was a game where they were calling everything plus stuff that I'm not even sure existed. So, they're... And it was for both sides, so, credit to them. They weren't showing favoritism or anything. But I think the Mexican national team had, 4 techs.
I did see that.
2 on the bench and 2 on Jorge Gutierrez.
Which I was not able to watch any of this game at all. So I really don't know a whole lot about what even happened, other than I know that Tyler Perry had a big shot. I know that a lot of people said Caleb, a.k.a. Buddy Rich, was looking really good. And that was really about it, honestly, from what I know about this game. So I'll leave it to you to talk about it a little bit more. I don't know if you watched any of it.
I watched the majority of it, yeah. I would say it was pretty similar to the Israel Select game, except for Naquan looked a little bit better, and RJ took a little bit more of a back seat, if I'm remembering correctly. But all in all, it was an encouraging performance and an improvement from what happened against the Israeli team in the first game. But ultimately, it did end up being a loss. But despite that, and this is where we can kind of move into just generally, I found both games encouraging. And the main reason why is because the problems weren't really that the players weren't good. The problem was that they haven't played with each other, and there was, that was a lot of the miscommunications that they would have, or someone would be going too fast for the offense to catch up with them, wouldn't be on the same page. I think that was the biggest problem more than any... Okay, Maple. Scared me jumping up on the bed with a hair tie. But I thought that was honestly the biggest issue, was you could tell this team hadn't gotten that opportunity to gel with each other. And the lone exception to that was Day-Day Ames and Naquan Tomlin, who genuinely already have that insane, like, I know where you are at all times connection. I'm not going to say it's Marquise to Naquan connection, because that was different. I'm not sure if I will ever see a combination like that at K-State again. But, Maple, what's up? Nothing? Okay. But I'm not sure if we'll ever see a combination like that again at K-State. But, I don't know. All of the freshmen look really good. Like, I think Day-Day is making an argument for playing time pretty convincingly, and so was RJ in the first game.
Yeah, I think the easier path might be RJ, just because we'll have Tyler Perry kind of being more of the ball control guy, even though I know that we don't really want to run like a true point guard. Mm-hmm. So Day-Day won't have as many minutes in that capacity, and I don't know, I can't really argue either way, but I'll just say there's not enough evidence for us to say that he can be an off-ball guy to play in this offense, especially because we do have a lot of undersized guards on this team. But RJ Jones is a little taller. He's, I think, 6'3", and he has longer arms. So he may have an easier path, especially if he can just be kind of a really reliable outside shooter, because that's what we saw from him in the first game. Was he scored 13 and was shooting really well from the outside, and so that's a possibility. But other than that, it looks like Buddy Rich was kind of starting to get into that category based on how people were talking about him, and I also thought he
got into a groove. Sorry.
Yeah, and I also it's okay. And I also thought that he looked good in the first game as well. Like he really belonged. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to get minutes this year. I imagine he'll get some at some point. He's probably just going to be someone that's just too athletic to keep off the floor. Mm-hmm. So I imagine we see all three of them at points throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be really interesting with this freshman class, because all of them are so good. Like, this isn't like the last few classes we've had where you can kind of expect to, the first 2 years of the guys in a program, it's like, all right, well, we'll see them eventually, but their job's not to contribute immediately. No. All three of the true freshmen have already sort of made names for themselves, and if they do end up redshirting this year, it may be like Jarrell Colbert syndrome, to where everyone's asking is like, okay, where's Jarrell? Oh, he's redshirting. Why is he redshirting? We wanted him to. 2 weeks later, where's Jarrell? You remember this syndrome. I was a victim of this syndrome.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think that the first 2 games in the Middle East were encouraging. Because the main problem was that they just haven't played together as much as you'd like yet. And luckily, there's a solid 2 or 3 months that they have to play together and learn each other, in a sense.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I haven't been taking these games super seriously either way. I've mainly just been watching to see if there's any like major highlights, and also for individual performances, as opposed to like the larger result. I'm not too worried about the results in these games, because K-State played its best basketball last year in March, and also, I guess, kind of in that January window. Because I remember most of their earlier non-conference games, they weren't like elite level at all. Like they were just fine for most of their non-conference games. So I'm not going to get too worried about it yet. I'll wait until there's a reason to be worried, but I do expect that they'll be more refined come that first exhibition game and that first regular season game in Vegas. But regardless, there's been a lot of encouraging signs from various different players.
Yeah, I agree, and makes me excited for the basketball season, I should say. Still not as excited yet as I am for the women's basketball season, but that's a different episode.
Yeah.
And it's a different episode entirely. God, I'm so happy for that. Anyway, but we also have, on this weekly recap, we have to talk about the first football matchup for K-State. And by football, I mean soccer. I don't know why I clickbaited you 20 minutes into the episode. But, yeah, the Soccer Cats had their first match of the year. First regular season, I should say. They had two exhibitions before against Missouri State and Arkansas. But their first match that counted on the year was up against Green Bay in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they ended up walking away, they being the K-State Wildcats, walked away with a 4-1 victory. And this was the first time that K-State has won an away opener in the program's history. Or an away season opener, I should say. I believe they are now 1-3-2 in away game season openers, which is a very specific stat.
Yeah.
But it's a stat nonetheless. And it's good to finally get that first victory.
Yeah. I was able to kind of watch this game. I had it on kind of in the background. But I was very worried after 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes of this game were some of the worst soccer I've ever seen K-State play. Like, I was genuinely preparing myself for one of the most aggravating and bad seasons of a K-State sport that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then the remaining 80 minutes were pretty much pure domination by K-State. Because Green Bay, they scored early in the 10th minute. They had an early goal, and I was like,
uh-oh.
I was very worried. I was very, very worried. But luckily, in the 19th minute, K-State responded. I think all of our goals were set-piece goals as well. Jasmine Brown got a header in the box from a corner taken by Kieran Singh. And Jasmine Brown, someone that you and I really, really were high on coming into this season. She, even as a defender, gets a goal here. And then Aliyah El Nagar, she scored in the 73rd minute and was able to, I think it also, that was on not kind of set piece adjacent, where it was after a corner, but there were a few different passes, and it was taken from kind of the edge of the box. And was actually a goal from distance, and the Green Bay goalkeeper kind of just let it go between their legs.
Which was very funny.
Yeah, that was a very embarrassing moment, I imagine, for them.
But it was also the moment that we were so back, so...
Yeah, so it was. And then only a few minutes later, Jasmine Brown got her second of the game. I believe a header again on another corner kick. And that was in the 81st minute. And then in the 90th minute of the game, just 13 seconds left, Joe Sees was able to score. I think it was another corner from Paige Dixon this time. So K-State wins 4-1, scoring 4 unanswered after Green Bay opened the scoring. K-State absolutely dominated the shot chart as well. They outshot across the entire game 27-3. They outshot Green Bay 10-2 in terms of shots on goal. K-State took 12 corners. Green Bay did not take a single corner. K-State only fouled 3 times. Green Bay fouled 7 times, I should say. All in all, a really nice performance from K-State soccer, despite the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad first 10 minutes of the game. So, all in all, I come away pretty pleased with this performance. They did what they should. Green Bay was not a great team, so they handled business in 80 of the 90 minutes.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I would describe it, is they handled their business, because outside of the first, I would not be surprised if over half of the time spent by Green Bay on K-State's side of the pitch was spent in that first 10 minutes, because we just literally suffocated them and refused to leave their side of the field for the majority of the match. And, it was really encouraging to see that, especially knowing that Tabini wants to be a more, defensive-minded team, but still able to keep the pressure up by staying on the other side of the pitch. But This was a really encouraging first game. Once again, it's first match of the year, and it was a match that we should have won against a team that only scored 7 goals total last year. So, we did what we had to do, and then we left. And I feel like that is a perfectly acceptable thing to do.
Yeah, I'm imagining those first 10 minutes, it was just we just weren't awake yet sort of thing, because we probably should have shut them out.
Yeah, probably.
But at the end of the day, you still win 4-1, so it could have been much, much worse. But luckily they responded pretty well to opening with kind of a dull thud. So it definitely could have been worse, but I'm glad it went the way it did. We still need to work on passing. Our passing was not very crisp for parts of this game. There's definitely still kind of a disconnect between the defensive line and the midfield and our forwards. Especially in the midfield, it seems we really struggle to distribute the ball from the midfield. And that's kind of always been a problem, I feel like, for K-State soccer.
As long as I've been following them.
Yeah. So it's been a little bit of a frustration for a while now, but it's something that hopefully will improve as the season goes on.
Yeah. That's the name of the season. That was the goal we set out, was improvement. The next matchup for the Soccer Cats is a big one up against the other purple Wildcats of the Midwest in Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. That is number 18 in the country, Northwestern. That is this Sunday. You can watch it on Big Ten Network Plus, whatever that is. And I imagine there's probably going to be a radio call on it as well. If not, that's a shame. That could have happened to anybody.
If nothing else, there's going to be live stats. So
yeah. So as always, support the Soccer Cats this Sunday up against the other Purple Wildcats of the Midwest. But that pretty much wraps up the news segment for this week's episode. So we can get into everyone's favorite, which is the wacky segment of the week. And this is how we've sort of run out of ideas, because we're basically just pulling ideas out of hats now. Oops, I did not mean to lampshade that that way. But this week's question: if you could have one animal play on the football team, what animal would you select? And I know that this is a very strange and abstract question, so let me balance it out by saying whatever animal you pick is capable of learning the playbook.
Okay. So any animal that I pick will learn the playbook.
Will learn the playbook. Whether or not that physical ability translates is up to the animal you pick, but they are able to learn what to do in theory.
Okay. If that's the case, then I'm going to keep it fairly simple and probably a safe pick and go with a gorilla.
Gorilla, okay.
I was mainly thinking of animals with opposable thumbs.
Yep.
In this scenario.
Opposable thumbs stay undefeated.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a few great options like a bear, an elephant, stuff like that, a giraffe, just give them the ball, no one can grab it.
Mm-hmm.
But gorilla is kind of like someone that can play something resembling traditional football, and they do have hands. So that would make playing traditional football a little easier. I would love to see a gorilla run like a 12-yard out. I think that would be very funny.
Okay, you said gorilla, and the first thing that came to mind was the tattoo that Trent Williams has, where he's the silverback.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so I was thinking tackle. I was thinking like offensive tackle. But I'm actually going to go a little bit of a different direction, and I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to head a little bit down under, and we're going to get a kangaroo to play middle linebacker. And the main reason for this, they could also play running back because they have a pouch. And good luck trying to strip the ball from the pouch. But I picked the kangaroo because have you seen videos of kangaroos like drop kicking people?
I have. It's pretty destructive.
It is devastating. So I guarantee you put a kangaroo that knows the defensive playbook at middle linebacker. They get a clean shot in the B gap. It's over. That ball's fumbled. that ball may honestly get launched back to the back of the end zone just via the drop kick. So I think that we've established, a pretty good animal team here. We got a gorilla at... Where you want to put the gorilla?
Probably tight end, I think.
Tight end. So we got a gorilla at tight end and a kangaroo at middle linebacker. Who's winning a coverage rep? Or a pass rep, I should say.
I'm biased, but I'm going to say the gorilla, mainly because the kangaroo lacks the long arms to really make a pass breakup. But I think kangaroos could be effective if they loosened up pass interference a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with gorilla narrowly, because I know that the jumping ability of kangaroos are a little bit better, but the arm length isn't. So they would have to basically do a soccer header to get a pass breakup every time that they wanted to get one. But I don't know, I feel like that would be a pretty reasonably even matchup. But yeah, you have any final notes on this episode before we wrap it up?
I don't have anything major other than it's really nice that K-State sports have started once again.
Yeah, it's nice that we're not just sitting here saying like, well, this could happen. It's nice that we're not talking about realignment. Do you think we'll make it next summer without talking about realignment?
No, I don't. I don't think we will. I think it's just going to become a thing. The Big 12 may not be as involved, at least, but I think it's going to happen still.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We just can't make a spreadsheet again. We didn't make one this year.
No, we did not.
No, wait, we did for the conference draft, so apparently that counted.
Okay.
But that pretty much does it for this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at Aggieville Alleycats. If you want to email the show, we are aggievillealleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I'm at ACEdwards00.
I'm at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, once again, head to our new merch store, AggievilleAlleycats.myspreadshop.com. Get 15% off if you are listening within the first 14 days or buying within the first 14 days of the shop being open. So that puts it right at the end of August when it will officially be no longer 15% off time. So get your goods while you can, and the new designs like established Alleycats, retro recording Alleycats, or maybe you want to get a little bit of a classic in neon Alleycats. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.